Hey, so this is day one, lesson one. This is going to focus on songwriting, structure, melody, arrangement. It's going to be a very basic production. I'm not really going too heavy on the producing techniques today. It's more focused on songwriting, telling a story, going through all the decision-making processes of melody, lyric choice, kind of the melodic math, I guess you could say, as well. I'm going to get a little bit into that and at least my understanding of it and why I make the choices that I make. I have no idea what I'm going to write today. That's the way I write. It's whatever's on, like, free association, whatever's on the top of my head, or whichever artist I'm thinking about writing for. I'm going to keep it pretty simple and hooky. Think of something that could work for, anybody from, like, I don't know, a Justin Bieber or a Shawn Mendes to a Kane Brown. I think the best usage of your time would be figuring out how to write something that's not too niche. I'm not going to focus on, for instance, we're not going to go down a rabbit hole of doing, a song for 24 Karat Golden or a song for Dua Lipa specifically or Halsey. I want to make a song where 10 different artists would want to cut it because the lyric and melody is so hooky. Normally when I walk into a room or a session like this, I mean, look, I have every instrument at my disposal now. I didn't used to. I have really fun, cool vintage basses and guitars, and I have a wall of synthesizers and rooms back there with even more synthesizers. I've got way too many samples. I've got way too many software synths. And the irony of that is that when I started writing, I had a very limited supply of good sounds and good instruments. So whatever soft synths or synthesizers I could afford, I had to utilize them. I had to learn them and use them like every inch of what they could do, which is also amazing. Apologize. The first set I ever had was Apologize. It was written on an MPC and might have even been this keyboard. It was either this keyboard or the Korg Triton. At the time, I remember Pharrell and the Neptunes used the Korg Triton on all the Britney Spears stuff, so I thought that was cool, so I bought the Korg Triton. And then I had an MPC, which is right back there, and all the sounds I had were sounds I had stolen from Timbaland. So you use what you have. I'm writing with Charlie Handsome right now to some of his guitar starts for Kane Brown, but I also, a few days ago, found out that Bieber's cutting one of my songs. By the time this comes out, it will either be out or he will have cut it and decided, nah, I don't want to use it. So who knows if it'll stay. But somewhere, I think that's why I just said I want to do something somewhere it's good enough, like, and simple enough that Bieber would like it. It could be about his wife or whatever, Kane. It could be about his wife or life or whatever. And if I can thread the needle where it's right there, who knows, maybe I'll try and write a song where, in my mind at least, it could be Justin Bieber and Kane Brown on the same record. That would be like that'd be a home run. So if there's an artist coming in, then I'm going to obviously already be aware and very much tapped into their sound and their vibe. I'm going to spend the first 30 to 45 minutes of the session talking with the artist. That's critical. That first 30 minutes to an hour of hanging out is actually where you get 99 times out of 100, unless you walk in with a concept already. 99 times out of 100, that's where you get the idea for the song. The artist will say something. They'll tell you about their weekend, how they went out, and like, isn't it so lame that I've got all these, I've got all these friends and I've got fake friends or whatever, like, and fake friends, there's a song. Or they'll describe a breakup or a situation with their significant other. And that always leads me somewhere. I'm telling you, almost every single time, you have to get the artist talking or the other writer in the room, actually. So if you're not in the room with an artist, then the other thing you could do is you have conversation. It's very critical. Don't look at it as wasting time. Like, oh, let's get to it. Let's write a song. It's like, no. Talk it out. Talk about your week. Talk about your day. Talk about what's going on in your world, in your life. Even if you're not with an artist, the other writer or writers in the room will tell you very often, if you're listening, they'll say something. There's always daily conversation, people, without knowing it, dispense with poetry while they're talking. They just don't realize it. And you just have to be aware and looking for it and listening and writing it down. That's another thing I would advise everybody to do if you are trying to be a writer in your daily life. Listen with a different set of ears. You need to start listening to conversations, whether you're watching the news or your parents or your sister or lover, whatever. And anytime you hear a phrase where you go, where all of a sudden you go, wait a minute, there's something to that phrase. You take your phone, open up the notes, write down that's the song title. So I've been doing that for years. So I always have a backup of concepts. I can walk into a session. If we get stuck, I know that I can whip out a concept and be like, okay, I got one. It's called Hey Jude. I'm just kidding. All right, so I'm going to get into it. I think I'm going to do guitar today. I'm thinking in my mind. I'm thinking like guitar, feel good. I already kind of have a tempo in my head. And again, the only reason I'm thinking guitar or I'm thinking what I'm thinking is because I've been in the mindset the last day or two of talking with Kane Brown, talking with Skrillex, pitching stuff to Justin Bieber. What I'm going to track right now, I'm going to try two different ways of tracking I'm going to do electric guitar. I want to do just kind of like a feel-good pattern, pretty major chord progression. And one of the first things I'm going to do is, if I'm thinking Kane or Justin, I'm going to reference one of their songs really quick. I can't play it on here because then we'd have all these copyright issues, but I'm going to listen to it on my, for 10 seconds, I'm going to listen on my headphone. Actually, you know what? I don't even need to do that. I don't even need to listen. I'm just going to Google, I'm going to look up the key of Kane's latest single. All right, D major. All right, so ultimately you want to write a song in the key that works best for the artist, right? So when they hear it, God willing, they hear it, automatically they sing to it and they go, ooh, it sounds good. It's like my voice sounds good on this song. I mean, there's a psychology behind getting songs placed. Like you might write a smash, but then you send it to whoever, Adam Levine, and it's too low. So you get 10 seconds. An artist is going to listen to something, you got 10, 20 seconds. You're either going to have them or lose them. And any one of those things could sway them any way under the sun. The only other piece of advice I would say is, if you sound like garbage singing in the artist's key, then none of it matters. Sing the song in the key you sound best in. In a perfect world, those two things can coexist, right? So I can sing I can sing a song in the key of D. I know that. Kane sounds great in D. So guess what? Today's song is going to be in D. And because I want it to feel breezy and kind of effortless and not dark and foreboding and or sad, I'm going to stick to a major scale. Quite simply, minor keys are beautiful and haunting, and I love them. But I'm not going to get into crazy musical theory on my this songwriting lesson or any of my lessons. You can go on the internet and pull up Google Jacob Collier or 50 other people, and you can learn everything you need to know about musical theory if that's what you came here for. I'm a firm believer that you shouldn't be that good. You should suck just enough to get the idea across. If you get too good, you actually get in your own way. And I'm friends with a handful of insanely talented musicians who have more musical ability than I will ever have. But I have way more hits than they do. And it's not because I'm smarter, and it's not because I'm a better musician. It's because I suck just enough. And that's critical. So don't get all caught up in, oh, I don't play an instrument, or oh, I'm not a classical pianist or whatever. Most successful producer writers aren't. One of my really good friends, who I've had a number of hits with, and his studio is just down the street from me, Benny Blanco. He doesn't play any instruments. He doesn't know what key anything is in. He walks up to piano and just does that and goes, oh, that sounds cool. What is that? It's like, oh, it's an A. Let's do that. Like, it's all about taste. That's more important than musical ability. I know guys that have PhDs in music and theory, and they've never written a hit song, in their life, or even a great song for that matter. So just know that your musical ability, whether expansive or limited, has very little to do with your ability to write a hit. If you're going into country music, I would recommend that you at least play guitar. That's my one caveat to that. Remember the quote though, you need to suck just enough. So I'm gonna grab an electric guitar. I'm gonna record it 2 ways, maybe even 3. I'm gonna try it direct in, just to kind of make it sound janky. One of the things you have to remember, or at least right now, for music production, whether it's Kane or Justin, whatever, we're in this weird era where, not for all genres, not for all songs, right? But for a lot of contemporary music, the worse it's recorded, like if it's recorded poorly, like if it sounds like you recorded the guitar on an iPhone, it actually sounds cooler and more modern. I have all this phenomenal, I don't even know, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of microphones and preamps and gear. I can record things at the highest level. And the irony is that right now, the opposite of that is kind of what's popular. Again, it's genre specific. If you're doing a Bruno Mars record, they will spend 3 months. Like if you look at 24 Karat, I'm spacing on a bunch of course, his song titles right now, but you know the songs, it's Bruno Mars. They will, when they're gonna, that last couple hits they had that sounded like they were from the 90s, they went and bought all the gear from the 90s and actually wrote the song. Once they knew they had the song, they went back and recorded everything using vintage gear, tape machines, vintage drum machines, vintage everything. They wanted it to sound exactly like it was recorded in the 90s, and they nailed it. So that is also a methodology. If I'm doing that type of record, and I want something to feel like it's from the 80s or the 90s or 70s, I'm gonna use the gear from that era. I'm gonna go through that process, that extra time and work and energy to make it sound authentic. That's not what I'm trying to do today. And to be honest, the 98% of the songs that are crushing it at Spotify or on radio or whatever, they're not recorded that way anymore. Sadly, a lot of those old studios and gear are sitting collecting dust, including the tape machine I have downstairs, which I haven't turned on in about 5 years. I'm gonna record the electric guitar into I have a Fender twin reverb amp, which is my go-to amp. I have a ton of amps. When I first had money to start building my studio, I decided to kind of get one of every category. So I have like the right guitar for every tone, the right amp for every tone, whether it's a Supro, the Gibson Twin from 1979. I've got the Marshall stack, on and on and on and on and on. They all do different things. And of course, right after I finished spending tens of thousands of dollars buying all this incredible gear, technology caught up, and now the amp modelers that exist in Pro Tools or Ableton are pretty much the same thing. They're very, very close. They're close enough that 1 out of a million people might be able to tell the difference. So I'm really glad that I bought all that stuff. Because I definitely use it every day. I think I'm going to use today, I've got I'm going to try a couple different guitars to see what tone that I want to get. I'm going to start with the Epiphone, the Union Jack. This is right here. This is one of my favorite guitars. My guitar player, Drew Brown in One Republic, bought me this for my birthday a couple years ago. This is the Supernova. It's kind of an ES335-ish. This was the Oasis, one of my favorite bands from the 90s. Noel Gallagher, this is his signature guitar. It has the patina from the 90s. It sounds really good. And it has a different tone than playing on it's a little bit warmer tone than playing on like a Tele or a Strat or an SG or anything like that, a hard body guitar. The hollow body guitars have a little bit warmer tone. They're more often used in jazz, rockabilly. I've got a Gretsch White Falcon, which is the Brian Setzer, rockabilly style guitar. This is the working man's guitar. The Gibson ES335 is the more expensive version, but I like this one. Yeah, but again, all this means nothing. You don't need this guitar. Like if you're gonna write something, you need a guitar, preferably Fender, Gibson, Epiphone. Don't mess around with Squier. They don't really sound that good. We're gonna plug in here. I'm gonna go direct in first, and if I like how it sounds direct in, then I probably will not bother to amp it. I'm gonna do Pro Tools today. I work in Ableton and Pro Tools. I can work in Logic. I don't really anymore, but I spent about 1.5 years doing Logic. And I don't use Logic for one reason. I couldn't get my bounces to hit as hard as in Pro Tools. So I could do the same song in Logic and take the same song in Pro Tools, and I would bounce it in Pro Tools, and it would just slam way. It sounded more competitive, more urgent, more energy. It hit harder. And I had people from Apple helping me and consulting me, and I'm still a massive fan of Logic. I'm a massive fan of working in it. I just can't, no matter how many times they called me to help me try and get it to sound as good as Pro Tools, I couldn't make it sound as good. Let's get this going. All right, so Pro Tools, going into harmonic. I'm pretty basic. I have, again, 19,000 billion plugins. I probably don't use 95% of them, and in reality, there's probably 5,000 plugins that I have that would make everything way better. I just don't have the time to sit around going through every plugin. I kind of wait till I'm in other sessions with other producers, and if I see them do something or use something that sounds ridiculously good, I just kind of go, note to self, next time I'm in my studio, I'm going to use that plugin on that. The trick to being a great songwriter is steal. You need to steal brilliant ideas that you see other people doing at all times. Amateurs copy, geniuses steal. I don't mean you copy someone's lyric or you copy their concept, but in terms of writing, if you hear a melody or a chord structure or any implement, you need to write it down or just make a mental screenshot of it. Whatever type of music it is you're trying to write, go through and look at the biggest 20 songs of that year or 20 songs of all time or whatever in that genre and write down the chord progressions, memorize the chord progressions. It just saves you time. It just saves you time. So you know what the progressions are of hit songs. It's very simple. One of the only questions I ask when I go into a session, the only thing I really care about, if the artist or the writer's like, I don't know what I want to write about. Okay, cool. I don't know what the vibe is. Okay, cool. I don't know what the lyric is. All right. The only thing that in my mind has to be a starting place is, okay, what tempo do you want to do? Do you want to do an up tempo? Do you want to do a down tempo, a mid tempo? What tempo are we going after? And at the very least, you can answer that. Oh, I'm in the mood for a ballad today. It's based on the weather. It's based on the weather outside. It's based on the night you had the night before. It's based on how much coffee you had. Tempo, chill, whatever. So today we're going to do kind of I think I would call it a mid-tempo. I just want it to be like a feel-good vibe. Almost like, in my mind, Jason Mraz or Jimmy Buffett. Feels like that might be 90. I might be way wrong. A little faster than I'm Yours. I'm not trying to do I'm Yours, by the way. Just I said Jason Mraz, so it made me think of it. And it feels like I guessed the tempo. That's one of my magic tricks. I can guess the tempo of any song. So there you go. All right, we have tempo mapped. Now I'm just going to play through some chords and see what sounds good. First of all, let's get the amp sounding right. All right, so that's kind of clean. I want a little more character there. Clean, I'm doing a small presence and warmth. Let's see what that sounds like. Want a little reverb. Warm vintage driver. Let's go through a few more sounds here. Why not? That's kind of interesting. Little too much bass. Little too much bass there. So I'm flipping between the pickups on the guitar to see what kind of sound I can get. Still a little too much bass there. Adjust the EQ here. So D, first of all. Let me think. Do I want it to be a reggae vibe? Nope. Let me think. So that's a 1-5-6-4 progression, just if you're keeping track. And what does that mean? I played guitar for years and piano for years, but I don't think in terms of progressions or numbers when I'm coming up with chords. I literally don't. I have no idea what I'm playing. I'm going, I know basic chord shapes, and I'm going after what feels right. So if I do like a, like, no idea what I just played. I just know that it sounds cool. And the second, and I'll occasionally be writing with people who be like, oh, that's interesting. You did a diminished flat 7, blah, 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 blah. Like, it just, that's, like, I know what all that stuff is. I could sit here and play a 10-finger chord, and no matter how weird it is, I could tell you what it is, but I literally don't care. It's not, that's not what gets me off. It's about what feels good and what's different. So like even this progression I'm messing with this. So this is the one in the D major scale. You have D, E, F sharp, G, or G flat, G, depending if you're a jazz player or not. D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, D flat, D. I think that's right. Is that right? I think that's right. So like, yeah, that's right. So there's your D major scale. That's the first scale I've played in about 5 years. And so within that, we want to keep it major. And your basic, one of the most obvious, like I call obvious, like used progressions, right? There are only certain progressions, chord progressions, that sound good to the human ear. And those progressions, this is a chord progression. So me going D major, right, to A major. So that's D is the one, like in the scale of D, you have D is number 1, E is number 2, G flat's number 3, G's number 4, A's number 5, B's number 6, D flat's number 7, and then you're back up to D. That is, so those numbers represent the chords in the progression. So if you hear someone, in Nashville, they use the number system. Most studio session players or professional musicians use a number system because it's quicker, it's easier to denote what chords you're going to. So if you have 4 bars, it might go, instead of it saying D, instead of it saying D major, here's the progression. D major, A major, F, G, that can get complicated. So they'll just go 1, which is the D, 5, which is the A, 6, which is the B, it's the 6th chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then G, which is the 4 chord. So that's why you'll see things that go 1, 6, 4, 5, 1, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 5, 6. Like those are all commonly used progressions. And the reason is they sound good. And when you're writing lyrics and melody, those progressions lend themselves to the most accessible melodies. It's just, especially if you're in the major scale, it's feel good. I could write 10,000 songs, and in country especially, they reuse the same chords like crazy. And it's because they work. It's like saying, you know, why is every Chinese restaurant I go to serve rice? Because rice works. It's amazing. And you can make 19,000 dishes if rice is the base of the dish. So that's why we reuse these progressions. When I first did Apologize ages ago, somebody took that chord progression on YouTube and then showed 10 other #1 songs that were written over that progression. Because we're all reusing the same stuff. The human ear only likes to hear the majority of human ears only like to hear certain progressions. And even those progressions change. Every decade or so, new chords get introduced to the lexicon of what people like. In the 90s, you had a couple additional chords that were in all the Soundgarden songs and a lot of the Nirvana songs. All the alternative rock had these introduced different chord variations. And those, if you play those chords now, it reminds people of the 90s. And they're like, ooh, that sounds like the 90s. Why? And because, well, that progression was used in the 90s, and then once alternative music went away, people stopped using that progression. And it reminds people of a certain time. If you're going like right, you're like, ooh, that's very 90s sounding, you know, and it's because nobody right now is really doing. And I can't tell you why those things happen or why chord progressions come in and out of fashion, but they do. Certain things remain true though. If you're bouncing between the 1, 6, 4, 5 in a major scale, those chords always lend themselves to be, you can write a song over those chords. They're easy to write over. So they're also kind of basic. So I'm trying to figure out right now if I like these chords or if they're too basic. So one way I can make it a little more interesting is to dress them up a little bit instead of just going. I can like that little. And that makes it a little bit more feel like a fully realized pattern. Those little hammer-ons, that kind of stuff, makes it just feel a little more interesting and not as just like boom, plodding along. And then back to the root. All right, so I think that's what I'm gonna do. Let's see if I'm in love with this. I'm trying to decide if I think I like that. I think for now. I can know the beauty of this versus now an amp. I always prefer the sound of amps, but once I've recorded off my actual amp, I'm committed to that sound. I can't change it. The thing I like about this is I'm playing these chords. I can, if I decide in 2 hours that the guitar sound isn't working for the song or I want to change it halfway through the song, I can do it because it's a plugin. I can go in and change it 1,000 different ways. It's quicker, it's easier, it's cheating, it's great, it's cheap. All right, so I feel like I need a little reverb here. And I want spring reverb, because spring reverb is what naturally happens on a guitar amp. Like I could use, look, I have 19,000 reverbs, right? I don't know what, I've never opened most of these. R-Verb I used to use back in the day. That was like the Nice Verb Reverb 1 I've used back in the day. I've got a lot of vintage reverb emulators like the EMT 140. When I produced all the Adele stuff that I've done, I've always used the EMT 140 plate reverb because that's a very vintage 1970s sounding reverb and emulator, and on her voice it sounds vintage. It sounds like she's from a different time. So my Adele go-to reverb is the EMT 140. I don't think we need that here. Right now, the most popular reverb in every session I've been in for 2 years, everyone uses Valhalla Vintage Verb right there at the bottom. This reverb right here is a beast. I typically go, if I want like something like really spacious and cool, you'll probably see me do it at some point in this song. That's a typical setting if I'm trying to get something to be just like spacious, like 40 to 50%, and like all of a sudden you're like, you're like. So just makes it all of a sudden, oh, it's Billie Eilish, you know what I mean? I don't know, but I'm assuming Finneas uses the vintage verb. That's what I'm assuming Finn uses. Finn, if you're watching, I bet you use that. Okay, so I'm gonna go, this is, no, who needs this many reverbs? This is ridiculous. I want a spring reverb. If you're tracking guitar and you're using reverb, you can use any reverb you want to. Use whatever sounds cool. In fact, half the time, if you use the wrong thing with the right part, you create something new, and an engineer will be like, yeah, you shouldn't use that. And it's like, that's not what I would use. And it's like, guess what? I'm not an engineer. And because I'm not, I used the wrong thing, and now it actually sounds cooler. So I'm a huge believer in no rules. But for this one, I wanted to see if I can get it, if it's gonna sound right. Guitar amps, the reverb they use traditionally, if you see a Fender twin reverb amp, it's called spring reverb. You can also buy a separate pedal that creates a spring effect. I think it has some, there are actual springs inside the amp, and the amplification, the amp speaker hits those springs and they reverberate and they cause this echo effect, and so thus it's called spring reverb. So let's see what it sounds like. That's kind of the vibe I want. And the spring reverb has like a tremolo effect. It's like, yeah, it's a cool vibe. All right. How much mix do I want? How verbed out do I want it to be? And when I do this, watch. So I'm gonna go from so that's a, B minor. Here's B major. So the chords are D major, A major, then B minor. Then I'm gonna go watch. I don't even know what that chord is, but it sounds good. Right back up. I don't think this song will change progressions at all. And frankly, I don't know what song I'm borrowing it from. I was thinking Jason Mraz, and so then in my mind this kind of feels a little I'm Yours-ish, but I don't know if it is. I have no clue. A lot of songwriters, especially in pop, not so much country, but in pop, a lot of songwriters who have success, it's very, very common to get sued because they're borrowing, a lot of the best songs ever. I hate to pop the creative bubble for people, but a lot of the biggest songs that you're in love with were directly copied. They started as copies of other hits from previous years, and they got changed just enough that you can't, unless I told you or the writer told you, you wouldn't know that they were copied on something. I've written with a lot of writers who that is their method of writing. And by the way, there's no shame in that. You'll pull up the 4-bar intro to a Fleetwood Mac song and loop it, and then, or whatever song, and then write a new song on top of that loop, then delete that loop and replace it with other music. But all that matters is that whatever you're writing to inspires you. So I've done that. I've written to, taken a famous song from the 70s or 80s, fill in the blank, Sly and the Family Stone or Marvin Gaye. If you're trying to go for that vibe, you take 4 bars of chords, write a whole song over that, then replace that. But it puts you, the trick, it's a trick, but it tricks your brain into getting in the spirit of that song. So you're gonna write a record that, like Bruno might write, I want to do a Marvin Gaye kind of song. And you take a Marvin Gaye sample, loop it right over that, and you automatically end up writing something that feels more Marvin Gaye or Michael Jackson, same deal, right? Then you delete that sample or replace it, obviously enough that you're not going to get sued, and you end up with the song, and everyone's like, I love this song, or it has a Marvin Gaye vibe, and you're like, I wonder why that is, and that's why that is. The biggest producers in the world do that. I don't do that personally. I probably should do it more. I'd probably have more hits, but I don't do it that often. Not for any reason. I just never have. I've been in sessions where we do that. I'm more likely to say, I want to do something that feels like Oasis or feels like U2 or Drake or whatever. And I know that music enough. I've heard enough Drake or enough U2, whatever, that I can kind of do something in the spirit of it. Where it gets dangerous is when, like I just said, oh, this has a Jason Mraz kind of vibe, right? Well, if I then went and listened to I'm Yours, I'd be in a very, very dangerous scenario where I might accidentally rip that off. And not because I'm trying to, but I got too close to it. So I purposely avoid referencing too many songs in a session, because without fail, every time I've done that, I've had to like go back or hire a musicologist and then change the song. I end up writing a hit, and then a month later, I've got my manager, whoever, calling me saying, yo, you have to change the song. It's too close to the song I referenced. So I leave that in your hands. That's some knowledge. You can do it. You can choose not to do it. I haven't been sued in 18 years, and every other writer I know pretty much has. And I'd like to think that maybe the reason that I haven't been is because of that. I don't let myself get close enough to someone else's song in a session. If I reference it on the drive over, I'm like in a Kanye mood and I'm blasting 808s and Heartbreaks, that's fine. Then I get in the studio, I do something that has a Kanye vibe, and I know I'm not copying it. So, proceed at your own discretion. All right, I'm gonna record this. I think we're at 90 beats a minute. I'm gonna see if that's good. Yep, I think that's perfect. If anything, I might slow it down a little bit, but I think for now, I'd rather it be faster than slower. 90 beats a minute, solid. 90 to 95 is the traditional hip hop tempo. 93 is like if you're doing it like a hip hop record, rap, urban, whatever term you use to define it. 93 is historically like the dead center sweet spot, but 90 to 95 really is you can do a kind of a hip hop vibe on it. And then, of course, now in 2020, you've got trap music, trap tempo, which is all around 140 beats a minute, halftime. So it's hi-hats are going 140 beats a minute. The beat is more like 70 because it's in halftime. So I don't know. All these, just like chord progressions, beats per minute are fads. They change all the time. I think that's cool. So pay attention. I'm going to record this. All right, I got a couple good takes, but now I hear exactly how I want the loop to be. So 2, 3, 4. Nope. So. Oh, this. All right, so what I was doing, I obviously didn't play it perfect in a row, but I knew each time I nailed one bar perfectly, and now I can, in theory, piece it together in Pro Tools, like tape. So let's see if I can. Real quick. Okay. Nope. Here it is. So, as you can see, I'm editing. I like this piece of it. That's the great first bar. That's a great second bar. See what I'm doing here? So let's see, and I think this is a perfect final bar. And wait a minute, did I skip? Yeah, I skipped the third bar, so 1 second. All right, so this one's almost perfect, but see, I can tell that I'm ahead, right? Now, I don't think you have to be perfect when you're playing stuff. It doesn't have to be on the grid. My rule of thumb is you can be behind, just don't be ahead. Ahead makes people feel anxiety. If you're playing ahead of the beat, if you're rapping ahead of the beat, like there's a whole trend right now of people, like these rappers that are like rapping so far ahead of the beat, it actually causes anxiety. And your average listener doesn't know that that's what it is. They can't articulate, oh, this sounds off. They don't know how to explain why, but oftentimes it's because someone's ahead of the beat. Also, it's not a racial thing or a white or black thing or anything, but I will say, in general, white people tend to be ahead, which is just not cool, in my opinion. Like, in my world, I grew up singing a lot of gospel, and then I was signed to Timbaland for a couple years, and for a number of years, I would be like the only white dude in any room, working with a lot of my heroes and icons. And I think from years of that, they drilled into me like anytime I'd be ahead, Tim would be like, "You're ahead of the beat, stop," just like kind of not yelling at me. And so like you learn quickly, all right, that's not cool. He's cool. I need to like level up, and I need to like get more pocket. And so a lot of times now when I'm doing editing vocals, if it happens to be a Caucasian singer, I do what's called the white man shuffle. And it's like, I'll take something like this. If it was a vocal, I'll take the whole song sometimes and just go and move it back. And you'd be surprised how often that works. It's kind of funny. So. There we go. There's the third bar. And this might be too far behind. Well, we might be good. We might be good there. All right, so this, I'm going to crossfade all that so they're blended. Let's listen to it soloed out so it's not. And this feels slightly ahead. You can see it is too. So I'm going to try and nudge that back. It's all about pocket. If this loop doesn't feel good, and the other overarching theory too is every single thing that you layer into a song should feel hooky enough if you played it by itself isolated that you could listen to it for at least a minute straight and not get bored. Or better yet, it doesn't wear you out. And if you have something that's ahead of the beat or out of pocket, I don't care how cool it is, like especially if it's ahead, you can't listen to it for a minute. It's just gonna, that's kind of one of your litmus tests is if the music is right, is if by itself it sounds great, then you're good. That's a little, you can see that's a little ahead. And I might not be able to cheat this. Let's see if it sounds real authentic when I get it. All right, so that's that looks to be perfect. All right, I'm not gonna combine these things yet into one clip, just in case I have to change them. So in theory, here's my loop. Watch, I know I'm doing this a little out of order, but in theory, that should. sounds a little off, so I'm going to do something kind of weird here. This may work or it may not. I'm going to stretch this to feel more like I think it should. Let's see if this feels right. No way to tell. Yep, that feels better. Now let's see if it works as a loop. And in theory, this will be the basis for the whole song. So, yep, this one starts a little late. It's funny, I know it's very, very subtle, but I could hear it. I could tell that this guy right here is just a little too late. And you can see by the waveform that I'm right. That's starting behind that click, and this is starting behind that click right there. So if I slide that over, in theory, that should feel more like the rest of the pattern. You don't want anything, you just want it to feel satisfying, and I don't know how to explain it, but perfect but not perfect, like played by a human, but also just like satisfying. I don't know. That feels good. I'm still having a little bit of an issue with the low end on this. And now again, I used a semi-hollow body. Had I used a telly or a hard, solid body guitar, I probably wouldn't have the issue with that low end. So I have multiple options here. I can lower the bass a little bit on that if I choose to. Lower the mid. I kind of want. I want to sound more. I want it to sound like, I don't know, like it was recorded in a bedroom. I know that sounds weird, but one of the things I can do potentially here, and I also want it to sound a little vintage. Okay, so I'm going to try a couple things here. I'm going to pull up an EQ. This is your basic EQ 7-band. Okay, that already helped. Rolled off. This is the EQ 3 7-band EQ. Look, I have a ton of EQs. I have so many good ones. The API sounds great. They all have different sounds. I have some of the world's greatest like analog EQs over the EQP 1A, 3S, whatever. The Abbey Road like signature EQs that are incredible if you're EQing live instrumentation, drums, especially for drums, vocals, you name it. Stereo, Pultecs over there, like very enviable French tubed Pultec EQs. One of like, I think they made a limited of 20 back in, I don't even know what year it was. Probably prehistoric. They all sound great. They're sitting over there. When I'm writing, my nemesis is something that impedes the flow. So if it's not fast and consistent, I don't use it. I have all these phenomenal things. I probably should take the time at some point to go through. The Oxford EQ is great. I mean, look at this. We can go nuts on this, you know. That sounds better. I actually want this to feel kind of lo-fi, right? So, like, I don't want it to sound too expensive. There's something about sounding expensive right now reeks of like, that's not cool. Like, it's not cool. It sounds crazy, like, to sound like you spent 19 hours recording something. You want it to feel like like it's authentic, like you just picked up a guitar in your room, recorded it on an iPhone. That's kind of more the vibe now with a lot of songs. So look, I did this Oxford EQ. Might be a little bright. But for the purposes of what I'm teaching today, I don't want you to go buy an Oxford EQ because that's going to cost a fortune. I'm pretty sure I paid a fair amount of money for that. So I think that's a British EQ company, or they made boards for years. So Pro Tools comes with this, right? I'm going to make a point of trying to use the most basic plugins this whole experience, so you're not intimidated into thinking you need to have your parents, or friends Venmo you a bunch of money just so you can buy gear, because I think it's a waste of time. So I can achieve functionally the same thing with this, which was free. The important thing with guitar, if you're EQing it, if you're EQing a song, if you're adding instruments or vocals or anything, the biggest killer is too much 1K to 2K, really 900 to like 4K. If you're looking at, that means 500 hertz to 1,000 or kilohertz or whatever it is, hertz, to up to like 3-4K on an EQ band. That's the part that makes things sound shrill and hurts your ears. And if you have anything in a song that has too much of a certain bandwidth, especially in the high register, I don't care how good that song is, it could be the biggest hit of all time, people won't want to listen to it repeatedly because it just wears out your ears, it hurts your ears. I'm not going to name names, but there's a handful of really, really successful recording artists, female vocalists I've worked with that, unfortunately, they have phenomenal voices, but unfortunately they carry a lot of 1 and 2K in their voices, and I have to carve that mess out, or you can't listen to it. Like you could, if I muted my EQ on certain songs I've put out before with certain singers, your ears would bleed because that high frequency just wears you out. Guitars do it because guitar tonality is similar to a human voice. Saxophones do it. Any instrument that's in the human register vocally, can end up getting a lot of that. So I end up always paying attention to 900 to 3 or 4K frequency band and make sure that nothing in your mix or your song is overloading that frequency. And I'll automate them on and off too throughout a song. And you might have a low verse where I turn it off, I bypass it, and then only like 3 lines in the chorus that just make let's say make you wince, and I'll automate that EQ on. I actually did it 3 days ago with a male singer. Every time he sings high, for whatever reason, it just overloads 1K. So that sounds great to me. All right, that's usable. I don't need the rest of this mess. I might end up adding a couple more guitar lines, like at some point in the song. I'm going to get into a place where I can actually start writing this thing. But it is important to create a vibe, right? Here's a plugin that I do love. It just adds a vibe. It just makes things feel vintage. And it's called the RC20. Okay? Now watch what I'm doing here. There's a little too much vinyl noise on here, but watch what this does. It adds EQ vinyl. It basically makes it sound like it's from the 70s. Look, you can add some wobble if you want. Watch this. It'll be like an old bad record, like. Cool, and then I'm gonna add, I feel like this one might benefit from a little background noise, just like texture, ambiance, as they say. So I have a couple things that I've recorded on my iPhone over the years on tour. I have like a Paris cafe. I've got a pub in Dublin. I've got New York City in spring outdoors near the Flatiron District, just random sounds. There it is, New York City ambiance. Hear that? That's actually from Benny Blanco's apartment. I leaned out the window right when like school let out, and it just adds a thing. So check it out. Okay, so we've got that. We're at 90 beats a minute. I got a little ambiance in the background. We got a perfect guitar loop. I'm gonna add, I'm not gonna program drums yet, but I'm gonna add snaps just so it's like something, right? The snaps I've been using a lot lately. Shock surprise. I mean, I have a billion snaps from pre-Slice, but there's some really good ones. The ones that I use a lot, and I'm pretty sure they're getting used everywhere because I hear them all the time. Is it Cashmere Percussion? There you go. I like those. Cashmere Volume 3, Snap 08. Those are really solid. I like this kick. It's a little too big for this song, but I'll throw it in there anyway. Let's see if they got anything else that I like. I just, like when I'm looking for sounds, kind of have a general idea of what I'm looking for, but oftentimes when I'm looking for something else, I like to go through and play other stuff because I might find something. I've started entirely different song. I'll be halfway through doing a song and I'll start a whole different song based off of one sound. That might be nice though when I do hats on this thing. So there you go. I was not looking for hats, but I just found one I liked. I flip between Splice and my own sounds folder that I've slowly collated for years and years and years. I don't just use Splice, FYI. Oh, they got some Foley in here. That's cool though. That's kind of tight, actually. Actually, I like that. See? You never know what you're gonna get. That's kind of tight. So that's called Foley, and in the movie world, that means sound effects. So like a door shutting, me doing that, opening up closing a AirPod case. That's all Foley. Let's see what else I got. Maybe I'll use that one. And I don't think there's anything else I'm gonna need. I think we're good for now. Got to get to writing. So I might end up using that as like later on in the song. Like, I don't know why. Again, and when I said Jason Mraz, somehow I feel like Jason Mraz would sample a glass bottle and put that in a song. So I'll just label that to bottle. I might use that later. That's muted for now. Something about that sound I like. Okay. All right, I'll save that for now, and I'll just kind of remember it, right? That's for later when I start doing hi-hats. That's kind of nice. That's the big kick for later. And then I got my original snaps that I was going after. See, I got all this stuff I wasn't planning on getting. Those might be too big. No, they're perfect. So all this other stuff here, I'm just gonna kind of save it. It's all muted, but I remember it's there. Shrink it down so it's not taking up all the oxygen in the session. Drag it down to the bottom. If I need to use it later, I'll use it. Meantime, I do try to keep, when I'm producing, drums grouped together, like kicks kicks before snares, bass right next to that, because the critical component of every song is that the 808 or the bass or live bass or upright bass locks in with the drums perfectly. So I keep them side by side on top of each other so I can always line them up. And then I typically try to keep the vocal right up at the very top of every session. The vocals at the top, typically right above the drums, because the vocals also need to be pocketed with the drums. So drums, vocals, bass, all in the same general area. And then everything else goes from there. It might go guitars together, keyboards together, piano together. Keep them all together. And if I'm being super organized and I'm not in a rush, I will even color code them. But lately, more often than not, I only do that when it's if I happen to be prepping something for mix myself, then I'll color code it. So here we go. So I want this to feel a little bit more stereo, like spread as opposed to one guitar. So this is one of my favorite plugins, actually. I would recommend you getting this. I use it on vocals all the time. Anytime I have I'm singing and I don't think my voice sounds cool enough, which is a lot, or if I think it sounds too pop, I throw, in the sound field category, and I throw Microshift on it. If it lets me. It let me do it. I think I lost the reverb though, so I'm gonna have to go back in and add a different reverb. So check out what this does. It takes a mono guitar. Just more interesting, and it's like stereo spread now, and we need to get our reverb back. Again, I want the Airspring reverb. It's a different reverb, but whatever, it's stereo. Well, that sounds like trash. Hold on a second. Yeah, all of a sudden it's hard to explain, but that starts to feel like a record now. Like, it's so weird. Like that one little effect, the Microshift, all of a sudden it's more engaging and more interesting sounding. That's what and snap. All right, so check it out. 1, 2, snaps on the 2s and 4s, right? So that's the 2, that's the 4. You might be asking, what does that mean? We're in a 4 bar. Here's a bar, right? Bar of music, 4 beats. So it's that each grid, each line represents a number. So that's the downbeat or the 1. You know, to each bar is 4 beats. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're in a 4/4 time signature. So if I say snaps on the 2s and 4s, you know, that means physically the 2 and the 4 downbeat. If I say on the ands, that means if anybody says, I want them on the ands or on the pickup, it'd be like 1 and 2 and 3. So that would be a weird place. You would do hi-hats there maybe. But you wouldn't do snaps. That'd be weird. So, right? We're already in business. So, now I don't like how the reverb fades out. It doesn't, I can tell it's a sample on my snap. And again, this is not necessarily the producing tutorial, but I'll just show you what I do so I can make it sound like it's in the room. This is another tip. If you grab something from Splice, a sample, a clip, whatever, and you can hear the room, the ambience, however you say that, of the sample, and it bothers you because you can hear it, it falls out before the next sample kicks in, so you can tell that you grabbed something from Splice or somewhere else. One little trick is you add reverb. It doesn't always work. It doesn't work if you don't need reverb, but it can also help. My favorite reverb in the world for gluing together 5 different sets of samples or instruments is Ocean Way. This is a relatively expensive plugin. There are other plugins that can do this. This one I just have found to be the most realistic. I've convinced myself that I actually rented Ocean Way Studios and recorded something in it because I have. And this is where the Beach Boys did a lot of their stuff, the Mamas and the Papas, a lot of different famous artists recorded in Ocean Way Studios in LA. I've recorded there a bunch. And it just sounds great. It just, you can control the microphones you're using, the distance, the size of the room. And if for some reason, where a lot of reverbs have that weird, like, not real sounding hiss or like tail to them or metallic kind of flangy thing, Ocean Way doesn't. It just sounds like you're in Ocean Way. I'm not sure how they did it. Some type of audio sorcery, no doubt. That's too much, right? That's too much. Obviously don't need that. So let me control this a little bit. Oh, we have it on 100% wet. That's why. See the difference? It's just extending that tail a little bit where it bleeds into the next snap, and now it feels like it's actually in a room. And if you want to fake it, one little trick that I've been doing for years, no human beings on Earth, if you want it to sound more realistic, no human beings on Earth snap with the same tone every time, right? That's how you can tell something's a sample. So what you do is you go in and you decrease and increase in 8 to 16 bar patterns if you want to be a total savage. You just at random, don't do it, don't even have math to it, just like randomly assign increasing and decreasing pitch using just basic pitch shift, right? So where you can't even articulate it, but the human ear will feel like it's more human, right? Because each one of these is now a slightly different pitch. So. Right? Already sounds like that was recorded live. That's because they're not all the same wave. They're not all the same pitch. I did it so subtle, but I promise you that it makes a massive difference. I usually do my snaps in a, unless it's a hip hop record, right? Or rap, where I just keep them static. If it's a pop record or anything organic at all, like this, I'll do it in like 16 bar patterns, because the human ear, well, at least mine, I can tell if you're doing something in an 8 bar pattern, and then that distracts me. So if I do it, takes more time, but if you do it 16 different snaps really quickly, just assign it takes like 60 seconds, then that pattern, nobody's gonna be able to tell with all the other instrumentation. They're just gonna think that they're real snaps, or that they're more realistic. It won't, there's certain samples that you use in songs, snaps being one of them, hi-hats being maybe another, where humans can tell that you're using a sample, and something about that bothers humans. It bothers the listener if each one is, and it's the same note, same length. And I can't explain to you why, other than that, all the great producers I know that produce pop, Max Martin, the Swedes especially, all the Swedish guys are very detail oriented, and they will go in with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that all these snaps are slightly different. Different. If I want to be a total savage, I would create 2 or 3 separate tracks with snaps and assign different reverbs to each of them within like milliseconds of each other, but just enough that it doesn't distract you. The key is that the snaps happen and you don't pay attention to them. The second something becomes trite or overused or inhuman, then you all of a sudden notice it. And really your goal when you're layering up sounds is to get out of the way of the song, get out of the way of the lyric and the melody. Everything should support that. So half the time I spend is changing sounds so they don't distract you. And snaps are one of the telltale signs that somebody doesn't know what they're doing. If you use the wrong snaps, or you use the wrong reverb, or you can tell that you're just copying pasting it, it makes the song sound cheap. And I don't know how else other to explain it. I've had this conversation in countless sessions with countless producers, and we all talk about how important snaps are in making them sound good. So for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through and do 16 bars because I'm already going way too long on snaps, but I'm just going to copy and paste those. So now we have a tempo, we have a vibe. I've manipulated what I've recorded just enough and added just enough ambiance and stuff to make it inspiring, which is the key, by the way. Like, don't over add when you're trying to write, because it'll distract you. You'll go down a production rabbit hole without even having a good song, which I've done countless times. Get just enough that it's inspiring and it feels like a vibe you want to write to. If you don't have a guitar and you just want to use a synth, very simple way to do it. You have multiple options here. Let me just show you two ways you can still get into producing and songwriting without having all the beautiful, distracting things on my computer and in my studio. For the easy cheat is go on Splice. This is all copyright-free, royalty-free. So once you own these samples, you can use them to make songs. And by the way, they get used all the time. If you listen to Rihanna's first, like one of her first smashes from like 11 years ago, 10, 11 years ago, Umbrella, that entire song came from Logic. If you bought an Apple computer, Apple came with Logic. In the Logic default folders of music is, I'm not going to play it right now, but that beat from Umbrella, Rihanna, listen to that song. That beat was free. It came with the computer. Someone was just smart enough to be like, oh, this is dope. No one's used it. I'm going to use it, right? So what did I say? Genius is steal? I mean, it's not stealing. He owned it. But the point is, he didn't make it. Half of the hit makers I know don't play anything. They just have good taste, and they know when something sounds dope, and they know they move quick and they use it. So here, one thing, I mean, I did a whole song with, I think it was with Tory Lanez like a year or so ago, because I just played a couple of these things. If I can find it, hold on a second. Here we go. Look at this. These guys play better than me anyway. All right, so in Splice, you've got miles, hundreds of megabytes, gigabytes, whatever, gigawatts. You've got tons of guitar loops, Ed Sheeran level, Drake level, and it's what you do with them. Like, for instance, look at this. I'm just going to give you a 30-second tutorial. So that's a very R&B chord progression, but like, you can take these 4 chords. There's your 4 chords. Done. They sound great. And watch. It's like, put them all on the same thing. I'd probably do a faster tempo. Sorry, 1 second. Look at this. I just grabbed chords off Splice. If you're trying to do a record like, I don't know, Alicia Keys or like John Legend, I just did a record with him. I did his first single. He would vibe on something like this. Like, I got a kick. I don't even know what I'm doing here. I'm just grabbing stuff. And then boom. Literally just grabbed these samples. I don't know what any of these really are. What is this? Check it out. There we go. Right? So you see where I'm going with that? So point is that this is, I don't even think we're at the 3-minute mark. And you got all of a sudden, and look, what's that thing I grabbed from earlier? Remember I said I might use it at some point? This hi-hat right here. I don't even know if it's the right sound. We probably want a more organic one. But like, and I said, what did I say? I say use it on the 1 and 2 and. We can swing these hi-hats a little bit too. Nudge them off of the grid. Make them have a little bit more swing. And right? So the point I'm making is there's one way to throw a track together, and at this point, we could do a whole song like. Ever since I went up in you, I take it matter what I should do. You tell me that you don't know what it was, and I love. I don't really care about you. See the way the cutter you do. You tell me what you got because you know I love. Whatever. Now you have like a swaggy R&B record right there, just from like 3 or 4 samples off Splice. And if you don't have Splice, you need Splice. I wish existed. I would have paid any amount of money. I would have given all the monies that I had when I was 20, 21, crying because I couldn't find good sounds. I knew how to make music. I wanted to make it, but I couldn't. In the early 2000s, getting quality sounds was next to impossible. And you just couldn't, you'd go on eBay, if anybody remembers that, and you would buy CD samples. It's a disaster. So if you don't have Splice, you need to get it, and it's gonna change your universe. Get really good at it though. You can't just use stock stuff. But if you're just writing songs and you're friends with producers, don't even worry about producing it. Pull in some loops, pull them into Pro Tools or Ableton or Logic, write over those loops, send those to your producers. They'll keep some of the stuff in there. They might mute it, they might reproduce it. All that matters is the thing about Splice is the sounds are already recorded so well. There's so much interesting stuff that it's inspiring. And the biggest thing is that you're inspired to write. You don't need to play an instrument at all. Now more than ever, I would encourage you to learn an instrument, but you don't need to be able to be some great musician. The absurdity of going and spending years and years and years trying to become a phenomenal musician so you can write songs is a complete waste of time. Start, and even financially, you're gonna be a lot better off if you start writing songs now. Even if you can't play, start writing over loops, over anything you can find on Splice or on the internet. Work on writing more than, I would rather you work on the songwriting than work on learning an instrument. There's, in my opinion, a much higher value getting better at songwriting than there is in becoming a phenomenal jazz drummer or something. And if you have Pro Tools or Logic and you can't play an instrument and you can't do what I just did, which is easy on Splice, grabbing sounds. Get a synthesizer. So what do I have here? I've got like tons of different sounds, but like watch this. I'm going to open Kontakt 5. This is one that you have to get because it comes with a ton of different instruments. You must get Kontakt. I demand it of you. And let's just do, what am I in the mood for? Alicia's Keys. Great piano, old soul funk guitarist. You've got basses here. Look at this. Let's do this. Watch this. Open a Rickenbacker bass, right? Double click on it. When you open things in Kontakt, right? You scroll here to find what instrument you want. Then usually there's a ton of other sounds within that instrument, right? I could open up other things here too. But watch. Close that out. Oh, okay. Whatever. You don't want to close. So once you have an instrument open, don't click on any other instruments. That's the one thing about Kontakt. It can only have one instrument open at a time. So we've got that bass open. Now watch this. Let's say I don't want to use this progression. I have a basic beat, and watch. I'm just making this up, but watch this. So easy. Now, if you want to be smarter, use a click track. Let's see here. I'll say it. Got stuck on a MIDI note, but you get the idea. So I play bass somewhat poorly, but I can play it. But like if all you did was just, you're like, I don't know what any of these instruments are or any of these notes are. It doesn't matter. I don't know what I was just doing, you know. That just sounds catchy. All you need is a synth. And if you don't have fingers, I know at least one of you out there doesn't have fingers. If you don't have fingers, you can actually change this, right, in Pro Tools to notes, right? And if you really want to, look at that. I just double-clicked, and you can draw it in, and just use your palm, or hire a friend who has fingers, and then you can literally draw in the notes, right? Anything you want to do, just go to the draw function, like there. Right, now look, I have a bunch of notes there, and watch this. Put it in clip mode, zoom in, and now I can just move stuff around, right? This is called programming with MIDI. Watch. You kind of already know where I'm going with this. You know, you get it. So you can draw in notes, you can do whatever. I mean, half the time I draw stuff in. I recorded piano, yes, a bunch of piano yesterday, and I hit the wrong notes. So I went in MIDI, fixed the notes, I made myself sound like a much better piano player just by drawing in the notes. You don't have to know. Listen, here's what doesn't matter. That note right there, what is that, A flat? Who cares? Doesn't matter. None of that matters. It's like, do the association between the notes matter? Does the movement matter? Does it feel like something that's cool? Would you want to sing to it? Would you want to write to it? Would an artist want to cut it? That's what matters. So there's your quick lesson in using sounds off the internet to put together vibey loops and inspiring moments. You don't need a bunch. You need a laptop and the internet and, I don't know, probably 20 bucks. But you don't need much. You don't need to be brilliant. I know that much. So now I pass it to you. You've seen my process, just getting something going. Yeah, it's your turn. Get something going, pick a tempo, pick a vibe, pick an instrument. Doesn't have to be guitar. It could be piano, it could be a synth, it could be a loop from Splice or the internet. It can be anything. It could be just melody. But get something that inspires you where you can start to create melodies and start to map them out. And yeah, take it away.